Okay, good evening and welcome to the Scrutiny Management Board. Before we start these proceedings, may I bring to your attention some housekeeping matters. There are no expected fire alarm testing today. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please follow the signs to the nearest fire exit and meet at the assembly point in Civic Square. Can I ask that you use your microphone when addressing the meeting and that it is switched off when you're not using it? Your mobile phones are turned to silent. This meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewings. By entering the Warspite room and during the course of the meeting, councillors are consenting to being filmed and to use of those recordings for the website. Before I get into the apologies, I just want to welcome all new members to the Scrutiny Management Board. I hope you have a fulfilling year. I will now move to item number 1, which is apologies for absence, and I will hand over to Elliot, our Democratic Governance and Scrutiny Officer.
Thank you, Chair. Following a change to council proportionality, Councillor Queswell is substituting for the Labour vacancy.
Thank you. I now move to item number 2, declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest in respect to any of the items on the agenda? Could I ask you to raise your hands if you have? We have no items or declarations of interest. Item number 3 is minutes. Are members happy to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of March? I propose that they are accepted. Obviously, only members that were present at that meeting, I know it may sound daft, can vote. So all of those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Therefore, I will sign the minutes as a true and accurate record. Item number 4, Chair's urgent business. There is none that has been sent to me beforehand. So we now move to item number 5, which are the board terms of reference. These are on page 13 to 16. What we would normally do is ask members if they have any questions on the terms of reference. These have been long-standing terms of reference. So with members' approval, I'd like to move on, if that's okay. I see no objection. Thank you very much. What we are going to do, and I've agreed with the Vice Chair, due to availability of some members and officers, we've agreed to change the running order. So the running order will be item 8, 9, 10, 7, 6, 12 and 13. We will move to our first item, which is item 8, risk. And I'd like to welcome Councillor Kate Taylor and David Northey, our Interim Service Director for Finance. Kate, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Before you is the reporting of the risk management position as of the 1st of June. Particularly for new members of the committee, I think it's worth saying something about our approach to risk. The starting point is that this council has ambitious plans and therefore naturally we are not able to avoid risk. We always aim to understand it, to own it and use it to deliver better outcomes for residents, but our approach is to support risk-aware decision-making rather than risk avoidance. it is clearly not possible for us to eliminate risk altogether. We currently hold 14 strategic risks at corporate management team level and 58 operational risks across all of our directorates. No strategic risks were added or removed since Q3, although the risk which relates to nurturing key relations has decreased from 8 to 4 and is now rated as low, which is good news. I want to be clear about what our risk register demonstrates. Every line describes something, an event or a condition that could happen, and what mitigation can reduce its likelihood and impact. It's a balanced and professional judgment about the future, counterbalanced with the opportunities that we must always look to seize. Risk scores are informed judgments and not measurements. They carry uncertainty by their nature. The mitigations are robust and ensure that we have clarity regarding the dynamic nature of the world in which we live, as well as the ambition of this city. There is some real improvement work behind this report. Devon Assurance Partnership has worked with our leadership on a large piece of work which gives us a clearer view of this register. All of the information in relation to the risks and mitigations are contained within the report, but I just want to highlight our biggest and most obvious risk, which is the failure of cyber security protection. In a world which increasingly relies on digital and cyber services, and where the expectations of people living in Plymouth who access our services have changed dramatically, we have worked closely with DELT to ensure that we protect the huge amount of data that we process as an organisation. That has included practical measures, such as investing financially in licences to protect the organisation, but also heavily in staff and member training and awareness so that everybody is clear about their role as a human firewall. Ultimately, the services that we provide to people in this city carry risk, whether that's in safeguarding, in housing, in infrastructure, or in the workforce. But it is how we manage that risk which forms the basis of the report in front of you. And although I own the register and am presenting it to you today, clearly these risks are a shared responsibility across the organisation and across all portfolio holders. And so I may not have all of the answers on the specifics today and all of the mitigations, but I'm ably supported both by David Northey and our brilliant Chief Operating Officer to answer any questions that members may have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And apologies, Si, for not introducing you at the start. Si Bellamy, who Kate said, is our Chief Operating Officer. Kate, just for me, and I think you touched on a really important point about members as well as staff. We've introduced the Know Before training, which I think is absolutely essential that all members take that seriously, complete it on time to protect the organisation, because we've seen so many businesses be hacked. So I just think, do we keep a record of people that don't do their Know Before, and what do we do to make them do it?
Good question, a good place to start. We do keep a register, so all members are sent the Know Before update training links on the 1st of every month, so you would have received one yesterday or today. They are small 5 or 10 minute segments that are designed for councillors to refresh their memory, but also to bring in new changes that are happening in technology. So there's the last couple, I think, have been focused on deep fakes, which actually is quite horrifying. Even to those of us who grew up in a digital age, some of the risks to us now are much more developed and much more scary. So we do keep an eye on the training that people are doing. We keep an eye on how councillors and staff members respond to phishing, both actual phishing but also orchestrated phishing to work out where the risks are in our organisation. I had the portfolio that Councillor Lowry now has before May, and worked quite closely with Pete Honeywell, who I'm sure will come before you at another Scrutiny Management Board, who feels very passionately about this subject, because the risks to the council are huge. They're not just financial, although finances are a huge part of it. It's also reputational to the council. If we have problems with our data, how can we expect residents in the city to trust us? Never mind all of the other ramifications that can come from that. So Councillor Lowry is now in charge of doing a bit of carrot and stick. I tried a bit of carrot and a little bit of stick last year. There were members who refused to complete their training at all. Obviously puts us at significant risk as an organisation. And I think that we should empower the officers who know about this stuff, who are the experts, to know what the best thing to do is. And nothing for me, when I was the portfolio holder, was off limits. I think if you can't be trusted to protect the organisation's data, we should question whether you should have access to that data at all.
Thank you. Any questions on the risk register for Councillor Taylor or Si? Come on, I know it's football. Okay, thank you very much. So the sorry, Councillor Creswell, that was very late.
Apologies, I'm just getting, working? Just apologies, Chair, I'm just getting used to this. I just wanted to ask, it's sort of a mid-risk, but it's on page 60, failure to recruit, retain, support workforce. Just any sort of comments on that, do you think? Particularly, I know that in some directorates and at some, some levels, it's it is a challenge, and to retain, and we do our do our level best, but we have to take into account that one of our problems and challenges is actually our geographical location, and I'm particularly thinking of some aspects of children's services and such, education and things. And I just wondered if you have any comments that you can put forward.
I can come in there. Yeah, thank you. I think that to the heart of the mitigation strategy for people is our people strategy. So obviously the scrutiny panel has reviewed that as well. So now it's about delivering that people strategy, and importantly with workforce development plans, because clearly have a strategy, but we need to look at specific areas of skills where we are short, and of course there's short-term measures of bolstering that with agency staff or short-term recruitment, but clearly the long-term pipeline is through the workforce development plans. I think the other thing I'd add to that is that includes at one end apprenticeships and bringing people into the organisation. We know the demographic of the authority in terms of our brilliant people. 50% of them are over 50, so therefore we know that we've got a demographic issue. So I guess two parts to my response. First of all, the people strategy, the workforce development plans, and then digging into the detail as part of those delivery plans about how we bring people in at the early level of bringing apprentices into the organisation, and then into upper tier roles, but also looking at niche gaps that we've got, particular areas we've got most demand and most stretch, to make sure we can bolster those roles. Importantly, so for retention, the staff we have got don't decide to leave because of the pressures faced on really critical services. So it's taken very seriously by myself and particularly Chris in terms of HROD, and the workforce development plan is the key response to that.
I think also the whole thing about growing your own as well. I think that's that's obviously a long term strategy, but I think that's and I think that's something that's happening in any way that can be nurtured and such is obviously excellent. And in fairness, councils aren't the only areas that have this challenge.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to commend Councillor Taylor and the team on sort of all the Know Before training. Working in the tech space, my day job, it's really interesting where, I think generationally we just know this stuff now, and actually you learn quite a lot through those trainings, so they are really, really good. Question for you on sort of the risk profile. I guess over recent years there's a lot of conversation around AI and things like that, and training. Good, reassuring to hear sort of all the plans with apprentices and things like that and how that's developing. I guess looking at AI now, I guess it equates to what, I don't know, Excel or something like that was 20 years ago. It was sort of bread and butter, and I suspect that workforce is coming through. That's going to be a standard for them, whether they're using Copilot or Claude or ChatGPT or whatever it happens to be. It will be second nature. And I wonder, when you look at that risk profile, whether you see that changing in the digital space in the coming years, so sort of decreasing potentially.
Difficult to respond apart from to know what we know in terms of the factual position. I think the factual position right now is AI Copilot is part of our ways of working, but it is used as an advisory tool, and we're always going to have the human in the loop. So in terms of decision making, we always make sure that anything that is done through Copilot, whether that's minute taking or other things, is really scrutinised to a high degree with zero trust for some of those elements. I think that's really important to say first of all. I think in terms of the threats we're seeing actually are complex. Potentially some of them are low level, but at high volume. So I think we've also got to be aware that the environment and the cyber environment is constantly changing. And I think AI is not so much our use of it. We can control how we use AI through our policies and our people and our training, but how adversaries may wish to use AI to find the back door, to find the gateways into systems that are quite difficult under previous ways of working potentially, but AI now opens the door in a different way. So I think working with Dell, we've got to be mindful that the threat is changing. It's changing more quickly than it has ever changed before. It's even more important to reinforce, Councillor Taylor's, that the easy doors are shut hard and shut early. But working with our shared service with Dell, we are very mindful of the complexity of the threat, and we're always aware that it is constantly part of what we have to operate in. One further point, I think resilience is a key part of this with our civil protection team. So if the worst does happen and we are subject to cyber threats, then we've got a very well-drilled response to how we'd recover from any cyber threat. Not to say it's easy, but we practice it.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
Councillor Steele, then Councillor Allinson.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. My question is related to risk number 2 around sort of failure and on the finances side. I'd just be interested in delving a little bit deeper into what the council's current exposure is to interest rate rises and any refinancing shocks, particularly with regards to the ongoing instability, global instability from the Iran conflict, and whether that's had any impact on the council finances and what mitigations have been taken to date.
David, I don't know if you...
Yeah. I was going to say, do you want me just to have a go at that? That's a really pertinent question, I suppose, given where we are. So as a management team, we're obviously keeping a very close eye on the key areas. So you've mentioned interest rates. I think the other one to think about is the cost of fuel. We can all see personally what happens when you go to fill your car up, how quickly it goes up and how slowly it comes back down, but it is starting to come down. So in terms of fuel, we are covered at the moment because we enter, as you would expect, into pre-agreements and pre-contracts. So we're covered for something like 80% through until early December, when we'll have to be thinking about how we then take forward the extra contract for the rest of the year. But of course, we hopefully we'll be through the code period by that time, so there'll be less impact, and hopefully things will have settled down in the Middle East. In terms of interest rates, you don't need to be aware, but we do work very closely with external advisors, Arling Close. We always meet on a quarterly basis, but at the moment we're doing that more ad hoc. So we've got a meeting that we've pulled in for the next couple of weeks. They are very good at monitoring what's happening around the world, but also at home, and they're very good at projecting interest rates. They advise us, we make the decisions, but at the moment they're saying that our strategy is correct, which is not to jump into start borrowing money, because at some stage something will happen and the interest rates should stabilize. So we're covering that. The other one, and it might come up later when you're talking to the leader about the pipeline, is of course on the capital programme. So as we enter into contracts with providers, they're starting to talk to us about the impact of material costs. So what I would say to answer that one is we have input our thoughts into what's called SIGOMA, which is a local authority run organisation, into their views, and we're waiting for a collective view to come back as to whether we're all doing the right thing or not. But in terms of the capital programme, just remind everybody that every project carries its own contingency as a start point. But we also, when we were putting the budget together that you approved in February, we did actually put some headroom into the capital program. So we have got contingency, but at the moment, interest rates are okay, and we are covered for our fuel. So I'm keeping a very close eye on it, but I'm not getting too nervous at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Allenton?
Thank you. Mine's in relation to the asset management strategy that came out of the budget meeting last year. We've got in the register, for the risk register, that this was due to be preliminary by the end of June and done by the end of August, completed. I noticed that it's been provisionally put into our work programme for February next year. Is that because we're due to see the final piece of work, or is there scope for us to be involved in that process earlier on? I know it's a very, very difficult one in terms of financial pressures, and FM has been a bit of a tricky one for several years now, but there are lots of things across the city that are very recognisable and noticeable, and people notice, are not getting the investment they need. And I don't know what form that would take, but I'd be very interested in being involved more in that process.
I can cover the timeline. So in terms of the timeline, Thompson FM have been appointed, and they're appointed back in early April. We're due to get their provisional first impressions report in the next few weeks, and as the note says, we're getting the completed report at the end of August. Once that, we've got to consider it, and then we'll place that in terms of our delivery plans against the finances. But there is opportunity, I think, part of scrutiny to look through it all, but I'll hold my comments there, but that's the timeline.
And Councillor Allison, you will be aware, I'm a big fan of pre-decision scrutiny wherever possible, and I do have the pleasure of facilities management in my portfolio now, so I'll make that commitment in the same way as I made last financial year.
Anybody else? Councillor Mahoney.
Briefly, I don't want to prolong this, I've just realised the significance of these emails I've been getting from No Before. I mean, I've been getting them saying you are 3 assignments overdue by 761 days. Well, as I've only been back on the council for, 50 days or less, I thought this is all a bit odd. So I actually messaged somebody today saying, was this a scam? But obviously it's not a scam. So I wasn't fully aware of what these emails were indicating. I think I messaged Jamie today saying, is this a scam? He hasn't replied yet. So am I the only councillor who doesn't realise the significance of this? And it was totally confusing, saying 761 days from...
I've been waiting for you to come back, John.
Well, yes. So, is everyone aware? Because I've never heard of it before. It's obviously happened in the last 2 years since I've been on the council.
So I imagine your email address has been resurrected from your previous life, so you can ignore the 761 days overdue stuff. I imagine that's just to do with your email address. I have flagged before that the emails themselves do look a bit spammy, and I was promised that would be looked at, but because we don't control the Know Before platform, we have to follow that through and ask them to make those changes. You will get one every month on the 1st of the month. That is a link, and that should have been covered as part of the member induction around the training, because it is part of your training and as part of your responsibilities as councillor. But I will take that back to Councillor Lowry, who that now sits in his portfolio, just to make sure that he fleshes that out and makes sure that everybody is aware of their responsibilities in that regard.
Okay, thank you. I think the risk register is a standing order on our agenda, but also I would ask chairs and vice chairs if there is something a specific risk that you want to delve deeper into, then add it to your own agendas, because obviously then you've got the specialist skills to tackle that. So I'd like to thank Councillor Taylor for coming along today. The recommendation is that Scrutiny Management notes the risk management monitoring report presenting the position as of the 1st of June 2026. All those in favour of doing that? That's unanimous. I was told off that I didn't give people the opportunity to vote against. by my democratic support officer. So as it was unanimous, we can now move on. So we move to item number 9, which is the finance report. And again, I welcome Councillor Taylor and the leader of the council, Councillor Tudor Evans, also David Northey, our interim service director for finance, and Stuart Wingfield, the service director for SP&I online. So welcome, Stuart. So, Kate, are you introducing this one?
We are going to double team, Chair, so I will cover the revenue position and Councillor Evans will talk to the capital element of the paper. So the report in front of you sets out the Council's financial monitoring position at month 2 of the financial year. So I think the first point to make is it's obviously still very early into the financial year. At this stage, we are not expecting to have a complete picture of every budget area, and the report reflects that. The headline position is that we are currently reporting a balanced budget with a nil forecast variance. Good news. Of course, that doesn't mean that there aren't any risks. There are a number of emerging pressures which are identified within the report, but they are exactly that at this stage, emerging risks, and officers and members are actively monitoring them and putting mitigating actions in place. Members will recognise many of these as the Council's big 4 financial challenges: adult social care, children's services, SEND, homelessness and temporary accommodation. These remain the areas where we need to keep closest watch over the coming months, and there is a concerted effort across the Council to control demand, contain costs and ensure that spending remains within allocated budgets. Alongside that, our transformation programme is now well underway, and whilst it is still a bit early to see that the financial impact reflected in the month 2 figures, the work is progressing at pace and we expect that programme to begin bearing fruit over the coming months. The report also includes an update on the delivery of our savings programmes. Those savings continue to be monitored closely and regularly by the relevant portfolio holders. Ultimately, Chair, this is exactly what you would expect from a month 2 monitoring report. It identifies where risks are emerging, provides transparency around those pressures and demonstrates the work already underway to mitigate them. We will have a much fuller picture at Q1, where every budget area will have been reviewed in detail, and members can expect a more comprehensive assessment of the Council's financial position at that point. I'm happy to take any questions on revenue, and Councillor Evans will lead on capital.
Yeah, do you want to go?
Thanks, thanks very much indeed, Chair. We continue to be ambitious in respect of investment into the city. This is reflected in the size of our capital programme, which reflects our success in attracting grant funding and investment in the city. I think I've previously mentioned in economic development alone, we are currently benefiting from £225 million of external grants. Homes England, Arts Council, National Lottery, Innovate UK, MHCLG and the MOD, just to name a few. And I don't think there's many places in the UK that can boast this scale of success. So the current programme, 26-27, is 147 million. Over 5 years, 291 million. It'll end up being larger than that, of course, because we're developing 124 million of pipeline projects at the moment. The programme's also secured a massive 395 million of private sector investment. These numbers are huge, but it's our bravery that's making that happen. This investment brings tangible improvement to the lives of Plymouth residents, whether through better facilities for our children in schools and nurseries, our adults with complex needs, through to better roads and in transport infrastructure, better health and reduced pollution, all through the job opportunities that these programmes create. Now, including within the programme, Chair, is £3.7 million for children's services, which includes nursery expansion places, SEM provision and funds devolved to individual schools. And they are responsible for spending those commuted sums. 18 million in adult and communities health, including 7.1 million in the Meadowview facility, 3.4 million in youth and community centres, 5.6 million in projects to tackle housing and temporary housing capacity. There's 86 million in economic development, Chair. 5.8 million in relation to the Freeport, including a Mill Bay terminal development and more industrial direct development. 18 million in the property regeneration fund, including 14 million pound investment in land at Embankment Road, and 54 million investment in strategic development projects, including city centre regeneration, National Marine Park, both of which attract a range of government grants. There's £100 million in strategic planning and infrastructure, including 12.1 million investment in Cheltenham Meadow Solar Farm, 2.5 million in local electric vehicle infrastructure, 41 million in strategic transport programme, improving the transport network, 23 million of investment in a sustainable transport programme, including further investment in the city bus fleet, which I know will be a particular pleasure to you. The strategic cycle network, pedestrian crossings, yes, pedestrian crossings, 12.5 million in the Better Places programme, including contributions to kickstart affordable home provision in the city. That'll be working in partnership with a range of housing associations. There's 78 million in street services, including maintenance, street lighting, CCTV, waste collection, and natural infrastructure. In terms of capital pipeline, Chair, there are a number of schemes that are continuing to be investigated and likely being investigated for inclusion in the programme once the certainty is established. So they don't go in there as hope projects, they go in there as stuff we intend to deliver. Now, I'll just give you a sense of some of those. 1.5 million further investment in residential homes for children's services. We're having a good hard look at that, and we've explained before why that's an invest to save proposition. 30 million investment in Milford School. We promised that we would build a new 200 place school, and we're delivering on that. A £9 million investment in PC assets, including the foreshore. You'll know that climate change is taking its toll on sea structures around the city. We need to deal with that. 3 million in decarbonisation and energy efficiency projects. That's not just good for the environment, it's also good for the pocket and the wallet. 20 million in the Highways and Transport Asset Management Programme, replacing older dated vehicles, again with electric where we can, but also more efficient vehicles. And 10 million in the play strategy and in parks and the public realm. All these schemes will be further developed, and they'll follow their usual capital governance route. They don't go in there until we've followed that procedure properly. Now, 30 million of this investment is expected to be grant funded, but actually, as plans mature, I hope that this will increase. So if I could sort of just bring alive, what has happened. We've completed Tinside, which has just won the Heritage Project of the Year at last week's Mitchell Moore's Property Awards. We gave a hint at the council that we'd won an award, and then the Lord Mayor decided not to announce it because there was nobody there from the company that won it. But nevertheless, it was a fantastic project. You've seen, I hope, that the CDC one is complete now and open for business, open to the public. The Civic Centre, this is important. Now, right next door to us, we've completed the strip out. We've announced our housing developer, and we're in for planning. We plan to start the cladding removal in September, Chair, which will restore the building to its former glory of about 1959. Anybody around in 1959? I don't think there's too many people around this table who remember that. But the building was a bit naked, and it'll look like that again. once we start taking the external cladding off. We've completed our 11th direct development at Langage at Beaumont Way in the Freeport, and that's really important. We need to do more of this work over the next few years because there's been a 900% increase in inquiries to Plymouth since the announcement 9 months ago that we were now the UK Centre for Marine Autonomy. We've completed, the Derryford District Centre, also an award-winning thing with the new Marks and Spencers and Aldi, I think, and a pet shop and a gym, which is and an Oggy Passy, all of which are essential now for the modern district centre, of course. We've completed port facilities and shore power at Mill Bay. Let me tell you why that's significant. Shore power, because regulations in the EU mean that you can no longer run diesel in port, and that's in Europe. But if those European ferries at the dock in the UK, the UK also has to have that facility to run shore power when ferries are in dock. So Brittany Ferries working with ABP putting in 20 million, us seed funding 5 million, us delivering that project, which is amazing. We've going to start on site on Ocean's Gate on an innovation barn project. They're not like barns with hay in them. They're more like ideas than hay. But we'll probably give you a hint of those in due course. New pontoon for Mountbatten Centre, refurbishment of Mountbatten Chair, which is going to bring the facilities in Mountbatten Centre up to 21st century standard. Although the thing was built in the 20th century, it does have sort of 19th century showers in there. It's not suitable for kids and users of that centre anymore. And so that will be brought up to proper standards, and it's a really important facility for school sailing around the country. We have loads of competitions here that come in on the quiet and nobody knows about it, but actually it's delivering amazing facilities. So work is underway with that, the new pontoon, and then a whole raft of public realm improvements around the Mountbatten Peninsula. We've done around the tower, and if you've visited the new park at Mountbatten Tower, I recommend you do it. It's got some amazing views from up there. We start on site in Cornwall. Why are we doing that with public money from Plymouth, you ask? Well, it's lottery money, actually. But more importantly, of course, we, along with Cornwall Council, run Mount Edgecombe Country Park. And in there is the Garden Battery. That's the building next to the ferry with the cannons on top, which for the first time ever will be open to the public. It's a beautiful thing inside with vaulted roof, and it'll be another entry point for people into the National Marine Park when it's completed. That'll be fantastic. Fulston Park, of course, phase 1 completed, phase 2 on site, and I'm sure other scrutiny committees will get updates on how that's going in due course. And this business case for CDC2 has been approved now, Chair. Planning has been submitted for that. That's important. I mean, the CDC itself is important. It's going to deliver 120,000 appointments in the city centre next to probably the most health deprived community in the city, in St. Peter and the Waterfront. But it'll be available for everybody who lives south of the Cranial Road. And it'll save that trip to Derryford for a lot of people. It's going to be transformational for that. And also, I mean, just as an aside, the staff there are already making contact with sandwich shop providers around the place. So they're already going to benefit from staff working at the CDC, wanting something for lunch and for evening meals. Finally, Bass Street has started on site, although it's probably less house building at the moment and more bomb disposal. But again, work is going to start on that. That'll be a 2-phase project. But what it's going to do is deliver a huge raft of social housing into the city centre, and sort of starting the proof of concept really of our plans to expand housing in the city centre. I mean, I think it's fair to say that you know, there's a lot going on in Plymouth, and that creates its own challenges into sort of in the sense of supply chain. You know, we've got the dockyard. You know, that £4.4 billion investment in the dockyard is consuming considerable amounts of concrete and labour, as is Derriford Hospital, the A&E project there, similarly. Just in the dockyard and Derriford Hospital alone, it's £8 billion worth of investment. So there's a lot of confidence in Plymouth at the moment. You know, this is the reason why we do capital. Not just because we like having our photos taken at openings, but what it does do is support the construction industry, it supports the professional services sector, it supports inward investment decisions, and it does make money for the council, business rates and council tax, and there is a payback for all that effort. Chair, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask if there's any questions for the revenue side and then the capital side, so we don't get into both. But what I want to open it, Councillor Taylor, to say that at last year's budget scrutiny, for those of us that were here, the cabinet members identified their biggest challenges, and that they would report back to scrutiny as they progress through the year. What I'm going to propose today is that actually we delegate the responsibility for those areas to the relevant panels. So if they want to choose to deep dive into those areas, they can, and then report back to the management board on their findings. Because again, going back to the questions that I said earlier, that panel's got more experience into that area. So we can then have an overview when we get a report back from the panels. Do you think that's a reasonable approach to take?
I think that sounds like a very good idea. It's difficult having this role because in theory I'm responsible for everything and nothing all at the same time, because actually much of the hard graft is done by the individual portfolio holders who will have a much deeper knowledge of what's going on in their budget. So I think it is much more fruitful scrutiny, I think, for members to hear from individual portfolio holders. I'm happy to come and sit alongside them if they would like, but most of them may decline that opportunity.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to open up to questions for Councillor Taylor. First of all, Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chair. So it's really positive to see, obviously we've got a balanced budget at month 2, but it's early in the financial year. Just reflecting back, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, month 10 last year we had an overspend of 4 million, I think it was. And we were implementing spending controls. So given that pattern, we've got these, you know, the big 4 you keep saying, and they are demand-led services. And we sort of know those patterns. What assurance do we have that this year's forecasting is effectively identifying those pressures earlier to avoid it sort of going into that overspend territory?
We had that discussion at the end of the last financial year that we need to be more realistic on the pressures that exist, particularly in the Big 4, but also elsewhere in the council, but obviously in those high pressure areas. So we agreed this year that we would be as hot as we possibly could on the monthly looking at those budgets across the cabinet. So it's a shared responsibility. So I, for example, have requested to meet monthly with both David and Gary as ultimately the directors responsible for the Big 4, as well as the portfolio holders covering those regular discussions. So I think the more people that are involved, someone once described it to me as a brick wall. Rather than being one brick thick, we should be as many bricks thick as we possibly can, and that's between us as portfolio holders and officers. We can't predict what is going to happen well, we probably could. We can probably predict that things are probably going to get a lot worse before they even start to get better. That's the reality of the situation that we're in. That's not through any fault of ours. That's because of the complexity of the people who need care, the awful price gouging of private companies that push prices up. And I'm glad to see that the government have indicated that they're willing to do something about that. I think that's really good news. And it's the same with independent school placements. You know, all of those things push up costs. I said in full council, as in regard to the outturn for last year, that until some of those cultural things change, we can, you know, tinker around the edges as much as we want. Ultimately, there needs to be a fundamental shift in local government finances and the attitudes of those external providers who contribute to local government. And I am as interested as you as to how they're going to do that. So as they act on behalf of the people, vulnerable people in the city who need care, rather than in the interests of profiteering. And if you ever get the opportunity to drag those people in, I would love to come and watch.
Thank you. Any other questions for Councillor Taylor on the revenue side? Yes.
Oh, this works, right? Hi. So it's more of a question on, so there's an element of investment or in spending that is in prevention, and then there's an element in kind of like reactive, responsive things that may often lead to that overspend that you mentioned. And several of the different kind of directorates and areas interlink a lot. And I think there are potential opportunities for preventative measures to be taken in one directorate, which may actually result in a kind of easing in another. So is there any kind of consideration for that in terms of budgets, where there could be more money put into prevention in one directorate in order to kind of like facilitate or ease on another? And I appreciate that prevention is probably being done on a directorate level, but as a kind of like wider scrutiny management and like financial consideration, is there any way that kind of that prevention can be done on a kind of larger level?
You are a councillor after my own heart, because I could bang on for hours about the benefits of prevention versus reaction, and how it doesn't just benefit the council in terms of financial savings, but also A, other organisations, and B, health outcomes, particularly in regard to public health. There is a fundamental shift that hasn't happened in local government for a long time, and I think it's a bold change of direction, but I think it's one that has become absolutely necessary. And one of the work streams for the transformation programme, which I started in my previous portfolio, and which Councillor Lowry is now following up on, focuses exactly on that, because I don't see any other way. I don't see how we can't focus on prevention. It's good financially, but it's even better for people's outcomes. I don't know if you want to say anything on the transformation stream.
Yeah, I was just saying that of the cross-cutting transformation streams, early intervention prevention is one of them. Another is reducing demand, increasing capacity. So that speaks to Plymouth Homes, Plymouth Children. So again, a lot of the cross-cutting schemes are covered under our Stronger by Design initiative. There's cross-cutting across the council. To echo the points that's already made, part of the in-year delivery, there's in-year delivery plans of projects that are in flight. Steps Plus is a good example of that, that's in-flight projects, but we're looking to build on that to amplify the impact and to increase the savings. But to your direct point, there's a specific work stream on early intervention prevention that's part of our Stronger by Design, and we're looking forward to bringing that to life, over the months ahead.
Thank you. Any other questions for Councillor Taylor? I'm going to make this the last one, because I want to give people the opportunity to ask questions of Councillor Evans.
Thank you. This was a quick one, and it's just for my understanding as much as anything. So I noticed that there was income-related risk attached to crematoria, and I wondered whether that was specific to the process of having a new crematorium, or whether it was linked into national trends, because at the moment we're obviously seeing sort of the impacts of low birth years hitting nurseries and schools. And I just wondered if you could talk to us on that piece, or somebody can follow up after.
I think it's something that Councillor Lawson would be able to delve deeper into. And I don't know the polite way of explaining that why that number is lower, other than to say that there are fewer people dying and attrition rate is lower. It's the polite way of putting it.
Okay, I'm going to open it up for questions for Councillor Evans on the capital programme. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chair. This one is like a lot more granular. It was because correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Evans. It's 135,000 tests annually, because you said 135,000 tests, but that's new diagnostic tests thanks to the investment in the CDC, correct? And what does that look like in terms of that investment we've put in? How much greater is the capacity of the city to do those diagnostic tests? You're right, in terms of health inequalities, having it where it is the perfect place. I'm just really interested to understand the kind of that investment we've done. How much more has it expanded the capacity for the city in terms of diagnostic?
That is an excellent question. Nothing to do with me, of course. And I'm sure Councillor Lawson, when Councillor Lawson is before you, I'm sure she'd be more than delighted to talk about it. But the main advantage, as I say, for patients is for many, they are now in walking distance. It's easier to get to by bus. It's also cheaper if you've got your car at the park than it is at Derriford. So if it were just about that, that would be a reason for celebration. But the main thing is the convenience. The main thing is the convenience and extra capacity. What I'm really excited about as well is the prospects for CDC2 delivering more general practice into the area. You remember, I'm sure, that we wanted originally for there to be one glorious Cavell Centre in that spot, which would do everything. And then the NHS had a pause on that, and then so we went for CDC1, principally to the efforts of the gentleman behind me here. We got the land sorted. We had an excellent working relationship with property people at the NHS, which enabled that project to come off the shelf and into the ground, which is, you know, terrific. And I think that success has sparked, you know, the NHS into life in terms of us being able to do more with the NHS in future. So I'm not seeing the CDC1 and CDC2 as the end of the journey by any manner of means. We worked hard with them on the REI up at Derriford, moving that out of the hospital and onto a purpose-built building on the site, which again, for users of the REI, is a much more convenient and much greater facilities, actually, and more modern facilities than they were enjoying even at Derriford. So yeah, it's just going to be transformational, I think. The staff were, I mean, obviously been used to being at Derriford for many years, so there's colleagues they'll no longer be seeing on a day-to-day basis. They're sad about that, but also really excited about the opportunities of being able to treat so many more people more quickly. There's 4 scanners in there altogether now, 2 MRIs and 2 of the other sort, which name escapes me. But Maria would be delighted to answer your question fully, I'm sure.
Thank you. I see, Stuart, you've got your hand up, or I didn't see it. I've had it pointed out to me.
Thank you, Chair. No, it was just to add that in addition to convenience for patients, obviously it's part of a strategy also to kind of free up space and capacity at Derriford Hospital itself. So the leader mentioned the investment programme around the hospital. So part of putting these facilities, you know, in the communities that they're serving is to free up capacity at the hospital. So I just thought I'd add that point in terms of the overall strategy.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Anyone else got? Josh, Sally? I'm going to ask you how I pronounce your name so I don't keep just looking at you.
That's okay. My name is Sahi.
Sahi. Lovely. And Sahi.
And yeah, please forgive me
Hang
if
on,
I...
excuse me. No, you're third. All right. So Josh first, then Sally, then Sahari.
Thank you, Chair. I had the privilege of boarding the visiting vessel MT Thon Resolve yesterday on the Catwater. So it's a brand new dual fuel vessel, and they were visiting Greenergy. It's a world leading vessel, electric powered, can hook up to shore power. And I picked up on the point you were saying sort of about Mill Bay and shore power, and seeing that vessel targeting Plymouth at this stage was fantastic, and shows, you were talking around pipeline, and pipeline isn't only, economic development targeting grants, it's attracting future industry, and that felt like one area. I wondered, whether you could talk to, that broader pipeline picture that you mentioned and the pieces that excite you, because I feel that's part of setting the tone for the city, and it is really, really exciting.
I mean, we created the first ever port strategy for the city, which I think we came to Scrutiny about and shared before, and it is about that. I mean, the opportunity of us being by the water is incredibly important. I mean, they're talking now about the opportunity for, I think it's short sea shipping, as a way of taking lorries off the roads and stuff. And, what we've got the real privilege of, as well as having ABP, who've just strengthened their dock so that we can take more lorries for exporting and importing through the ABP. But, we've got a really ambitious trust port in Catwater now. The work Richard Allen's doing is brilliant. And if you look at the innovations that are already, the trust port's already brought in, the Barbican Landing Stage project, which we know certain members of the council objected to at the time, but I think the reason for doing that has been more than repaid. If you look at now the way in which big vessels are able to come into the heart of the city, into the Barbican and tie up there. But also, as Richard is often fond of telling us, Plymouth is quietly getting on with the job of exporting and importing an amazing amount of stuff every day. And it's going to be really, really important now that Catwater decarbonises as well, for the reasons you've been into that. And I know that is an issue for them. There will be an issue around that, though, and that's our dear friends in the National Grid. We nearly didn't have the investment in Mill Bay because our dear friends in National Grid said it would take 8 years before they could deliver more power to ABP so that they could do the decarbonisation. And we had to do a considerable amount of naming and shaming in order to make sure that didn't happen, and they got it. And we want to do the same conversation again for the trust port, because it's really important, because they've got a blooming Great Main running past their port. It's not as if they're going to require a huge amount of infrastructure, but there's a further problem with the grid, which I'm sure at one of the scrutiny committees we will talk about that, and it has to be sorted out. But if we've got a reputation for being ahead of the game, or trying to keep as near to the head of the game on this as we possibly can, I'd be mad keen on doing that.
Josh, do you want to come back?
Yeah, if I could just quickly,
I'm conscious,
very quick,
can we keep
come back
our
on that.
questions very succinct, please?
Yeah, so on that point, you mentioned short sea shipping, and I wonder from a procurement process whether we consider going forward looking at the impact of utilising short sea shipping for the shipment and movement of goods for building of this city, because there's so much in that pipeline, and if we can do that, we talk about green footprints, that would just be such a huge thing for us to lead with as a city.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, if you're thinking about the amount of construction materials that have got to be brought into the dockyard over the next few years to do what they're doing in there, and then you add to that the project around more housing in the city centre and beyond, it's something that we really ought to be working with the port owners to see if there is any prospect for doing that. I think that's an excellent suggestion.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Creswell?
Thank you, Councillor Koxker, but it was something I was previously going to pick up with something else, so it's fine.
Sahari?
Sorry, it's Sahi, and apologies for. This is more of a question of like what is being measured, and forgive me if it is, and I'm not aware of it. There are various different methods of investment, you know, whether it's corporate funding or grant funding, and these injections will have multiplier effects in our local economies in terms of like how much that injection is being kind of like continually used and retained within kind of communities versus being extracted out in a way and only having one, you know, iteration of multiplier, for example. So I'd be really interested to know on a more macro level, when we have these different kinds of investment in different projects, to what extent is that investment staying within local communities, to how quickly is it kind of stopping in its effect? And I don't mean like return on investment, but I mean like the multiplier effect of that spending, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, you know, our economic team are working hard on inclusive growth, right? And the whole purpose of doing all this stuff is that everybody in the city feels the joy, right? So it's really important. But I mean, I'll give you this statistic. You know, we've got below average unemployment in the city. I've been on this council 37 years. I can't remember a time when that was the case. So something's working. But in terms of that micro stuff that you've just been asking about, I mean, our economic team have got statistics coming out of your ears. So if there's any specifics that you want particularly to know about, through that growth and infrastructure scrutiny panel, I would suggest that be a really good place. I would have a chat with Josh here about how that might come out. Toby and the team regularly come to the scrutiny panel to give updates on how we're doing on a huge dashboard of economic measures. So if there's anything specific there, you can ask them. If there's anything specific in the meantime, you can always email them and they'd be more than happy to give you the stuff. They've all got brains the size of planets, so I'm warning you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No. So therefore, I'm going to first of all thank Councillor Taylor, Councillor Evans, and the officers. It asked me to note the recommendations of the risks highlighted at month number 2 remain a nil variance and is formally reported, and that we note the 5-year capital programme for 26 to 31 is forecast at 299.099 million as set out in table 9, with a reconciliation and detail of movements in the period provided in tables 8 and 11. But what I would also like to do is add a additional recommendation, is that all scrutiny and all overview and scrutiny panels include finance, performance and risk as a standing agenda item on each of their future meetings. This standing item should provide panels with a regular assurance on the financial position, performance against key priorities and indicators, and significant strategic and operational risks relative to their respective remits. It should also enable panels to identify emerging issues at an early stage, strengthen accountability, and ensure that financial stability, sustainability, service performance, and risk management are embodied within the scrutiny processes. This is new, and I think this is the way forward. I'd like a seconder for that recommendation. Thank you, Josh. All those in favour, please show. And that's unanimous. So that's item number 9 and 11 completed. I'm just going to say, I was asked before the meeting about the football. Now, for those of you that don't want to know, close your ears. But the score at half time is England 0, the Democratic Republic of Congo 1. And they scored after 7 minutes. So I said I would update people. So I've now done that. And we will move on. Not that I wanted to depress everybody, but I was asked to do that. So we now move to item number 10, which is the leader's forward plan. So we normally don't have the leader at this, but because this is the first one, we wanted to give the leader the opportunity to talk about the ambition and the forward plan. So, leader, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So we have to publish in advance a list of the really big decisions that we have to make. And it's a sort of 3-month look ahead. So you in Scrutiny can have a look forward, see if to help you plot and plan some of the stuff. It's not every decision we make that go in here. There's a sort of defined number of decisions, and it's done principally about if it affects more than one ward and if it's a lot of money. I mean, I think that's the simplest way that I can explain what they are. But the list is there. It will change, or it will be added to in the course of the year. I would say that sometimes things do move. If there's delays for any reason, you'll be advised of that, and any changes to the any additions and deletions will be brought to your attention. And I just leave it there for your noting, really.
Thank you, leader. There's one question that I know certain members of the panel feel quite strongly about. Is that we want to do, as all scrutinies, want to do more pre-decision scrutiny. So it was agreed at our last meeting that I, as chair of Scrutiny Management Board, would write to the leader and the cabinet members to ask them to pick out some of the important stuff that's coming up over the next 12 months. I know you can't guarantee when, but we as the Scrutiny Management Board and Scrutiny would really like the opportunity to actually help cabinet members make decisions. So after this meeting, I've got a proposal that we formally do that to you and cabinet members so that we can actually have a real input in help you make decisions. So I just wanted to ask whether you would agree to that.
Well, of course I will, Chair. I mean, there's obviously going to be practical restrictions on exactly that. It's not everything you want or curious about that you can do that with. But I know that the cabinet members, because we have discussed this, and we discussed it last year too, we wanted to see more of it to make sure that more people who are, you know, beyond the executive of the council get involved in digging around and having a probe, because that's how you learn stuff. It's also how we make better decisions. So, of course, we'll do that. I look forward to your email.
Thank you very much. Right. Has anyone got any questions on the forward plan for the leader? I think it's all quite self-explanatory. So therefore, I will thank the leader, and you can go and watch the second half now. It will be fine. It will be 3-1. Anyway, so I would ask that the board note the forward plan of key decisions and utilise it to inform work programming across the scrutiny panels, but also the recommendation that the chair and vice chair write to the cabinet members themselves to ask them to highlight issues or decisions that they're going to be taking within the next 12 months for it to be referred to scrutiny, whether it be the management board or scrutiny panels for more pre-decision scrutiny. So I'm proposing that. I would like a seconder for that. Councillor Creswell, thank you, you were first. All those in favour, please show. That was unanimous. So thank you for that. I'm now going to move on to, or backwards, to item number 7, which is the corporate plan performance report that we've got. So I welcome Councillor Mark Lowry in his new cabinet position, and again, Cy Bellamy, the Chief Operating Officer, to present it. Could I, just for the new members of this committee, if when you're doing your presentation, because I know people will have individual questions about a pothole or a certain thing, which actually you're not the best person to answer that. So in your kind of spiel, Councillor Larry, could you explain the report and what it's highlighting? Thank you.
Good Chair, and I was going to do exactly that. Whilst I'm in a new post, this isn't unusual for me to present this report because it quite often sits alongside the finance portfolio anyhow. And what we're attempting to do here is to measure the performance of the council against the corporate plan. And we have a number of key indicators that officers produce on a monthly basis and present to Cabinet so we can see their performance. That information is used by officers during the normal working day to measure the performance of the council. We use it as Cabinet, you'll use it as scrutiny panels to understand exactly what's happening. And I'm very pleased that you've already made a recommendation to embed the relevant aspects of each element of this into the other scrutiny panels, because it is always very frustrating for me, because you've all got good questions, but you'll be asking them about a specific that I won't necessarily have the answer to, and it's appropriate that those are asked in those panels. So hopefully that's a very brief explanation of what we're attempting to do here. But we do have this report before us today. It's looking back at the last 3 months of the last financial year at the performance of the council. And you will see that it points out who the lead member is responsible. It also points out the key officer, and it also now points out the key responsibility from a scrutiny perspective. But on top of that, I will give you some of the summary headlines as to what's contained within the report. Our purpose, of course, is to link it against a corporate plan. We have 6 areas that we're working with, which is the police, crime and antisocial behaviour, keeping children safe and adults and communities safe, and ensuring that we do this in the best manner to provide quality public services and also responsible financial management. As I've said, each member is indicated as to their responsibility with respect to this, so please ask those questions in the relevant panels. We do have some good news here in respect of antisocial behaviour. This has fallen to its lowest level following some additional work with the police. The Highway Department have completed more potholes than they normally would do in this time of year because they had 1,689 potholes to complete as opposed to 660 for the same period last year, and this is principally due to the weather. The number of children on children protection plans reduced significantly from 348 to 274 in March, and every planning application submitted to the council has been approved in a timely manner. Some other stuff that's happened during this period that's not really shown specifically here. We've launched the first phase of the new food waste collection services. That previously reached 20,000 households in the previous 3 months. That increases our recycling rate significantly, of course, which is great news because they've been flatlining at about 40% for almost a decade now. So this gives us a significant increase in our recycling rates. There are also some clear challenges set out in the report. Affordable housing completions remain flat. Stored sites, the number of sites coming forward for housing developments is pretty benign. Secondary school absence remains far too high, and access to dentistry continues to be a significant issue, and bus patronage has fallen by 7.7% over the year. I think you've already heard from Councillor Taylor with respect to finance, so I won't further go into that. There are some aspects of this report that you can't directly read across from the previous quarter, and those relate to a new telephone system put in December, and of course the national measure for good and outstanding schools has been discontinued, so we'll need to find a new way of doing that. So hopefully that gives you an understanding of the purpose of the report, some of the good stuff in there and some of the not so good stuff in there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to open it up to questions first before I speak. Okay, there are none. I think this report is a very good one for all of us scrutineers to be able to go through it line by line and pick out areas that we want to see to be improved. And actually that was, as you can see, there is a theme behind my kind of thinking that actually we do need to get under the skin of some of these. And actually, again, the way of doing that is to highlight it and bring it through the relevant scrutiny panels so that we can challenge where we feel we can add best value. That is going to be my theme for the next 12 months of making us as a scrutiny more effective in challenging. So I welcome this report and I would look forward to the chairs bringing to our future scrutiny management board what they've actually done on these areas. And it's something that everyone can take part and contribute, because Paul and I are going to have regular meetings to see where we feel we should go. So I've got you first.
I think this is kind of a similar point that Councillor Gove made. Obviously in this report you have kind of the overview and then a direction of travel, but it's very kind of qualitative in the sense that you could write really positively about something that might be really quite far away from the corporate plan, or you could, for example, if we go on to the social and affordable housing or build more homes, there have been 96 affordable home completions. I guess the question I have is, would there be a way of reporting this that was more tangible of, okay, this was the target and this is where we are, like a red, amber, green? Or is it that it has to be a more qualitative overview? Is there a way that we could get more like tangibility in, like, this is where we're going, this is where we are?
Si, did you want to come back? Oh,
Well,
sorry, Mark.
I would just say we've had a traffic light system in the past. We've had graphs, we've had words, we've had numbers. If you look at the history of this report over the last few decades, it's changed in many, many ways. And of course, people look at data differently. So you've given an example of a traffic light system that maybe works for you. Some people like to look at numbers, some people like to look at graphs. I'm reluctant to change it because the next person will say, well, this doesn't work for me, can we have this please? But it's your report really at the end of the day. If there's other information you need, then I'm very happy to supply it.
Okay, I'm gonna ask, sorry, have you got a supplement or not?
I guess it was more on less on different ways that we may all interpret the kind of outcome, but the fact that would there be anything that we could have as a benchmark of like, this is where we were supposed to be in the corporate plan and this is where we are now, in the sense of the direction of travel was a really great essay to have. I don't mean to remove that. I would be interested to see whether that's something we could put in to see the gap, and then we can focus on it, because I suppose it's an overview of it.
Yeah, specifically, I think where there are good indicators, we want to set targets that are reasonable ones, they can be put on there. So that is something we're looking at, and there are some items that they need to have targets in there, to complement Councillor Lowry's point. The second one is something we are actively looking at doing is benchmarking against statistical authorities. Where do we sit versus North Somerset? Or, so I think that's something we'll look to do, because that helps to interpret data. And the third point I'm going to add is, of course, we're continually evolving how we present the data due to the applications like Power BI. Yes, there's different ways of formatting it, but this is where technology can help, so we can focus on the actions and let the data be pulled automatically. And that's part of the work we're doing as part of Stronger by Design, to use our data more effectively.
Okay, can I just, sorry, myself and my vice chair have been very lax. Could those who wish to speak please put their hands up again so we can see? You've got Councillor Hadfield, Councillor Steele, Councillor Creswell, Councillor McCarthy. Okay, so we will start with Councillor Steele.
That's helpful, because I was going to follow on from what Councillor Rory said, because she hit the nail on the head in terms of the bit of data that stood out to me of the 96 completions of affordable homes. And I was thinking about what you said, Councillor Lowry, about you're here as the kind of strategic one. So I was thinking, how do I frame this in a way that it's linked to housing? But I think that point around having benchmarks, and particularly statistical neighbours, is actually really important. Manchester City Council, okay, a lot bigger authority than us, like 2.5 times, but they built over 1,000 affordable homes in that last year. That's on a completely different level to what we've done. So mine's less of concern around how the data is presented, more that the data itself doesn't look that positive. And I get that that's more of a housing scrutiny panel, but because housing is such an important issue, I wonder if there's some way that can be reported back to the Scrutiny Management Board, because it seems quite, I can't remember, I think the number's 220 in the report. After the narrative, there's actually the data. But that shows we look like we're quite off track to what we should be. And that should be a concern for us all, given housing is such a problem.
And I think that's exactly the point of this report. And that's why I'm going to reluctantly push back, because we've got data coming out of our ears. So all that stuff about statistical neighbours, we do that every day of the week, and that data is available. So if you in this panel look at something like you've just done now and seen there's an issue there, or the issue's become clear to you because it's been highlighted as well, then it's incumbent upon the panel responsible to take that issue away. You can direct them to do so, and the officers will provide you with that statistical data that we have and all the elements that are being undertaken to address that issue. And that's appropriate for that panel to do that. So I think you've just proven to me that this report is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, which is to highlight at a high level against the corporate plan, noting that we deliver 300 services, and beneath those 300 services, there are a whole array of individual elements that are going on. So we're highlighting the key aspects for you to take away and consider how you wish to deal with it, because that information is all available. You know, we do that every day of the week.
Can I have a supplementary, please, Chair? Yes, you can. So, because on page 31, there is that data there in terms of the figures for 25-26 and the kind of gross around 96 homes, etc. I can't see anything around statistical neighbours, and I do find that a really useful metric in terms of benchmarking against other local authorities. So I do think that's one area where that report could potentially be strengthened, and it's in line with how we do it on other scrutiny panels of having statistical neighbours, because otherwise the data's a bit meaningless. 200 houses sounds like a lot. Is it a lot? I don't know. Let me look at Torbay, let me look at whoever's we define as our statistical neighbour, so I can know whether we're actually doing well or not, as the case might be. So I think for that high level area, my recommendation that I'd be proposing, Chair, is that additions of statistical neighbours is added onto this report to enable us to better scrutinise.
I'll take that away and have a look at it, but I'm not going to commit to it here and now, because quite frankly, with respect to that housing element, it'd be really, really challenging us to provide a realistic neighbour that we could measure ourselves. Other things like adult social care, children, so on and so forth, that's incredibly easy exercise for us to take. Building homes is a very, very, very challenging aspect to undertake in any local authority at the moment. And we're all trying different approaches to find solutions, of course, and we've been incredibly fortunate in that we have hopefully a bespoke deal with government to assist us in building more homes. But at the moment, the reality of the situation is it's unaffordable to build a home in Plymouth. It costs more money to build a home than it actually does to sell it, than the sale price. And the differential is at least £50,000. So you won't find anybody who wants to build a home in this city unless we, as a council, or somebody puts 50 grand on the table to assist. And of course, those differentials change depending on where you are.
Okay. I will move Councillor Hadfield.
Thank you, Chair. Just for me, I'd like to see a little bit more relevancy rather than antisocial behaviours, for instance, remain low compared to what are the numbers, where are they from? There's multiple examples I can give you. I won't bore everybody with them now, but you know, if a statement's made, I'd like the comparable from what time frame, where are the numbers, what were the numbers, rather than they're just low. What does that mean? Thank you.
I'm kind of in danger of making the same point here. The purpose is to measure the direction of the travel, and it's for the panels responsible, as you said at the very outset, and we've made recommendations for them to do so. So that's their job to do that. And in that panel, they can ask for a range of information. It could be this thick. That would explain over the last decade all the elements that have been undertaken. That is the responsibility of each of those scrutiny panels. This is a very high-level report just to give people the direction of travel so we can see if there's any issues or not. And if you want more data, that is relevant to the panels that are responsible for that, as the Chair has said previously.
Personally, if I was compiling it and making those statements, then I would validate it from those scrutiny committees or ask them to give me that data before I put it in a report to bring it to this level. But what do I know? I'm new.
I think you make a point there, Mark, that actually that highlights what I said. We're getting the overview, yeah, but the scrutiny panels themselves can delve into and ask all of those questions, because this panel will look at it and say the overall direction is not good. So, and then we can send it to the relevant scrutiny panels to say to them, we need to look at that. We need to find out more detail. We can bring the police in, we can bring the antisocial behaviour team in to a scrutiny and make recommendations. What this report does is highlight to us as an issue, what is the direction of travel, so to speak, and actually it raises points like that have been raised today that actually we can then do it. And there is nothing to stop this panel joining forces with, I'm not sure whose antisocial behaviour would come under housing, Sally. So we could actually set up a cross task and finish group or a select committee on the direction of travel of antisocial behaviour within the city, or and then direct our own terms as to what we want to look at it. And I think that's something we need to do more than we've done in the past. So this report that Councillor Lowry is actually bringing to us and to all members is this is where we are, this is where we were, but you as scrutineers have the ability to narrow that challenge down to anything that you want with facts and figures, etc. And actually, when you do that kind of scrutiny, it works really, really well. So I hope I've answered some of the question there. I'm trying. Councillor Creswell. Oh, sorry, Si, did you want to come in?
No, I'll come later on, it's fine.
Councillor Creswell.
I don't know if this might also be helpful as well, as I think you've got kind of almost three levels here. You've got this sort of like the real detailed data and such that individual scrutiny panels actually look at, and I know that through experience of in children's and the real detailed, granular data, and as Councillor Lowry says, there is a lot of data that's easy to access in that area, which is actually well established. I think we've got the kind of like the more of an overview and direction of travel here, and I wanted to kind of fit it into a question that I wanted to ask, is that how is this effectively then communicated to the wider population in such a way that is kind of like easily accessible, our kind of like our comms and our communication. And the one thing I would pick up is on a simple sort of basis is the food waste collection that's been going on. And I think the next tranche is due to come out in and you spoke very positively about that. The next tranche is due to come out in November. But what's very interesting is that there's been so many events I have been to where that team have been there very much communicating with the local population in a very positive way, the work that they have done in schools, the work that they have done at various events with this incredible amount of enthusiasm. And I think that that actually is a really good message of how you actually have work that's being done and the direction of travel, if you like, actually effectively being communicated to the wider population.
I think you show the purpose of this report, because for an awful long time we've been flatlining on recycling, and therefore we've had task and finish groups on it, we've had scrutinies into those aspects, and from that we've developed additional proposals to increase our recycling waste by introducing food waste collection. And of course that's been shaped by the scrutiny panels, because they've explained, don't just do this to people. When you do introduce such a scheme, can you please make sure that not only do you communicate effectively via the internet, that you go out and meet people, you go into community centres in schools and into churches, so people understand the reason we're introducing this, because else there's a reluctance to say, oh, I've got something else to do. Why have I got something else to do? I mean, the bit that amazes me most about the food waste collection is people complaining that it's going to smell. Well, if you put it in your brown bin's collected every 2 weeks. If you put it in your food bin, it gets collected every week. You know, that should be a no-brainer to everybody. And it's that kind of stuff that we need to explain to people so they buy into understanding these services. But the wider point, of course, this is for you guys to review. If you see issues or you want to understand things further, data is available to give to you. Those scrutiny panels can request information. They can set up task and finishes groups to understand what's going on. And they can use this data in any way they want. There's loads of data available, but I'm just reluctant to put loads of it into this report, because I've done it before. I presented a report like this, right? That is massive, and nobody wants to read it because, you know what, it's 300 pages and it's just too much information. It's a high-level report, so you can see and send the respective teams off to provide further information or look into certain aspects you want.
Thank you. Josh, Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. I love that last piece, you know, following the data. And I think actually this is a really good conversation for us to be having. I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Lowry. And to be clear, my day job is working in data. There's no conflict of interest because it's working about fish, but it's data nonetheless. And I think the piece that we have to remember is, you know, Councillor Lowry explained, we're collecting more and more and more data every day. And if we just present it all numerically, we'll drown in it. It will be overload. So I think the pieces, and you know, I've heard colleagues, he's mentioned that it's happening in other scrutinies, it happens in natural infrastructure and growth. We request a deep dive on specific data that we're seeing. And we did have a conversation around how AI and things like that could support officers going forward, because you know the point on housing, you know, it's not an apples for apples thing. You know, a statistical neighbour, will we find a neighbour really truly that's representative? So we actually have to statistically model and pull together loads and loads of different factors, lots of different data sets to get something that is truly comparable. And I think the opportunity of AI in that sense and some of the tools that are coming online to support officers are going to let us interrogate this data increasingly more in the future. But I just really want to echo that point that we have that ability to do those deep dives, and that works. We can get to the detail, whatever the detail people want to focus on, we can do that in those scrutinies. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Councillor Lowry? Sorry, Paul, didn't see you there.
Yes, sorry, thank you. Question for Councillor Lowry. Just looking at the format, I was just wondering if you could consider in future just splitting some of the sections up, because they seem to merge. For instance, you've got fewer potholes, cleaner green streets and transport, and then, and again, it could be me that's just looking at it wrongly, but in with that section you talk about food waste. So, and there's other sections that kind of blur into each other. I'm just wondering if you could consider putting another heading in where things are separated.
Can I just check something, Councillor? Are you referring to page 23?
Yes.
And the written words there?
Yes.
And you would like them?
Well, just split, because it doesn't look to me that food waste, and again, I could be wrong, you might disagree with me, sits under that heading of potholes, cleaner, greener streets and transport.
Noted.
Thank you.
I think he agrees with you. Okay, any further questions? Okay, so Councillor Lowry, I think that's you done. So thank you for attending tonight.
That you are councillors. If you want data, ask for it. It's as simple as that. And we've got loads of data. Please only ask for it if you really want it, though, because obviously it takes time and energy to create it. But it's all there available for you if you need it. So having read this report, there's more stuff that you want, just ask me or one of the officers in Democratic Support or Sign. I'm sure you very happily support you in getting that stuff.
Okay, thank you. Before we note the report, Councillor Steele, you intimated earlier that you wanted to make a recommendation. Does that still stand?
Yes, I think so, yeah. I can't remember what my recommendation was now. I hope one of you wrote it down. Elliot.
Through you, Chair. Draft wording, I came up at the time, please amend, is the board recommends that the Cabinet member for organisational efficiency, the corporate plan monitoring report is amended to include statistically comparable neighbours. Did that
I know that Councillor Lowry said that's a challenge to do, but I would like that to be looked into because it is so useful in so many other scrutiny panels, having the statistical neighbours. Personally, I find it grounds the data in reality in terms of what am I looking at and how do I compare to everyone else.
Can I make a suggestion? Sorry, could you just read that again for me, Elliot?
Yeah, sure, Chair. So the board recommends to the Cabinet Member for Organisational Efficiency that the corporate plan monitoring report is amended to include statistically comparable neighbours.
Chair, can I just suggest that you change that to benchmarking, because in many instances you will not have statistical data available for the aspects that are shown in here.
Councillor Steele, you proposed that. Are you happy with that?
Yes.
Mark seconded it. So with that recommendation, plus the original recommendation that the Scrutiny Management Board notes the corporate plans monitoring report for Q4 of last year, and the new recommendation, all those in favour, please show. All those against? Any absenteeism, I was going to say, abstentions? One. Okay, thank you, Councillor Larry, you're dismissed. Right, we are, as you know, or you do, but most people in this room know I'm a stickler for allocated timekeeping. We are running 15 minutes over schedule at the moment, so I am going to move on. I'm going to ask the officers that are going to speak to be precise and concise with their reports as we move forward. So, Si, I believe the business plan update, which is in our supplement pack, pages 1 to 6, you're going to present that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. This follows on from the previous items, and it's simply to say that in our performance and accountability framework, which you've obviously seen with the corporate plan, business planning is part of that. It really does link our kind of financial strategy to our corporate plan and in terms of our in-year delivery plans. So when we went through the previous report, it set out the 6 priority areas in the corporate plan, and then the business plan then delves into the detail in each directorate about how those priorities are going to be delivered, and importantly also links them to the financial elements within the MTFP as well. I think I'd also say in reference to previous comments, Chair, that each of those business plans should be included in the element of looking at performance, risk as well, because I think the delivery of the in-year business plans complements those things. It's part of it. So simply in terms of my comments this evening, it's the business planning complements the priorities within the corporate plan. It is part of our accountability framework, and it means we've got a golden thread running through the organisation between the corporate plan, our delivery of the corporate plan, and how that's tackled in year.
Any questions for Si on this one? I know it's straightforward, but I like to give people the opportunity. I can see no questions, so thank you for that. We now move to item number 12, which is the budget scrutiny recommendations. For those of us that were here last year, they were what we asked Cabinet to do, and 18 out of 19 were accepted. And I have kind of intimated those budget recommendations throughout this meeting. And the follow-up was to Councillor Evans that we have a bigger input in pre-decision scrutiny, which was accepted. So I'm going to ask if anyone has any questions on our budget scrutiny recommendations. I know the 4 of you weren't here, 5 of you weren't here last year. But I think it gives a flavour. Changing the way that the council's scrutiny works is sometimes like changing, and I'm sure Councillor Allenson will agree, it's like changing an oil tanker around, but we're making progress. and I want to continue that this year. And though that budget scrutiny last year was the first major change in how we do things. So any questions? If not, we will just note it. Okay, noted. All those in favour? Thank you. Now, what we normally do for those of you that are new on the committee, and I intimated it earlier, where chairs of scrutiny will come along and give you an update on what they've done between meetings, bring suggestions to us for anything that we need to look at from their relevant committee, and also give us the opportunity to ask the chairs of their committee if we've got any concerns. Now, Elliot and I spoke this morning. We're actually first at the moment. So we're going to look at moving we're not going to move the day all the time, but we're going to look to make sure that we meet after the scrutiny panels, because it would make much more sense of our time. Because if I go around the table now and say, Councillor Murphy, report on your last meeting, she'd have to go back to the last municipal year, which is a waste of time. So we're going to do that going forward. But what I am going to do is give everybody an opportunity to speak if they've got anything that they think they want to bring to our attention, and I know I'm doing it out of line, that they would like either the Scrutiny Management Board or for them to take back to relevant scrutiny panels, so we can note that, so then they can go back, do it, and then report back to us next time or the time after on the progress that they have made. I have one suggestion that I would like to look at, because it's very keen to me, and that's public transport. What I'd like to be able to do there is a cabinet or leaders sign off, I believe, coming up on the delegated bus grant. So I think I would like to be able to see, to scrutinise, could be this panel, it could be, I would presume it was Councillor Creswell's. So that's Josh. About how, and Councillor Lowry intimated that public transport and bus usage has dropped off over the last 12 months. We've invested in the network out there. The government gave us some additional money to invest in subsidised routes. So I would like to kind of delve deeper into actually why is the patronage decreased when we've got more buses running. So it would be interesting to have a look at that. Now, I don't know if Josh, you want to take that on.
Happy to take that on, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Now I'm going to open it up to anybody else who's got any ideas or suggestions that they'd like to bring forward now. And then that would be covering two birds with one stone, or whatever the saying is, because that would go into our work programme and future work programmes. So I'm going to open it up to the floor. I'm going to go around the table anyway. Josh?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I've already mentioned it to the relevant directorate, but ponds and water having a more prominent feature again. We've dealt with it in natural infrastructure and growth last year, but looking to bring that back into the agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
How come I got Councillor Murphy and he got Josh?
Because I've taken the opportunity to introduce you to the new members of the committee. I did call Councillor McCarthy earlier on.
Thank you, Chair. As you can see from our work programme, Chair, we've already got a lot of items on the first meeting. And it's quite interesting that we were talking about deep dives. Because if you have a look at our work programme, we have got a deep dive on the drug and alcohol services, which fits in nicely with the leaders' forward plan. Because if you look on there, there's been additional funding for drug and alcohol services for 26-27. So I think that just proves a point that you don't actually have to have it on that other report. If you've got an interest in something or you want to look at something, you can actually just put it on your work programme anyway. On top of that, Chair, we've got a site meeting for the Life Centre next week. We're going to probably go down the diagnostic centre and probably Meadowview as a site visit also. So I tend to ask my members that sit on the scrutiny if they've got anything in particular that they'd like to bring into the scrutiny. 9 times out of 10, they don't really give me anything, but they do get asked at every meeting if there's anything in particular they would like to bring in that I would consider it. So that's me, Chair.
Councillor McCarthy.
Sorry, I neglected to mention, Chair. So obviously we've got the work schedule that's in the documents. So the ponds and water focus was an ask to have additional focus on that within the year. And I also neglected to mention that we did our first site visit with Natural Infrastructure and Growth. So we visited the Civic Centre and a number of key locations around the city, all part of the City Living framework that's coming to scrutiny later this month.
Thank you very much. Councillor Criswell.
Right, this is quite new to me, but I think there's a couple of things that might be interesting to think about, particularly looking at some of those ideas of site visits, and also the opportunity for a kind of like a deep dive. Is that right? I don't know if I'm completely off piste here.
Sorry, people can't hear me if I don't. Actually, you're running the scrutiny panel with your vice chair and your members. Whatever you decide as a scrutiny to do, providing you're within your remit, you have the ability to do what you think is best to get the best results out of the resources that we're using for scrutiny. So go on, go for it, Councillor Creswell.
So one of the things, and having a bit of discussion about this, and it does seem to be interesting that the discussion came up about that sort of housing and the direction of travel and the evidence and all of those things. It might be interesting to do some sort of like, as you've suggested, some sort of like cross task and finish work, some opportunity to go out and perhaps go into the field to some extent and have more of a kind of like a deep dive and then a report back. I don't know how that always necessarily works, because obviously some of that work would be happening outside of the council, an opportunity to bring in perhaps other experts that might be relevant that wouldn't perhaps necessarily come to that particular scrutiny. But I think that could be quite interesting, and then perhaps to come back and have a more intensive discussion, conversation, which obviously would then be webcammed. And I just wondered about that as a possibility and an interesting way to perhaps work, even if it was just sort of like a possible pilot.
I think that's a really good idea, and I actually think, being new to the role in scrutiny and to this panel, I would actually hope that today you would put a recommendation in that we set up a joint between your committee and anyone on the management board that has got an interest, and let's work together on a select committee on that. I think that's a really good idea, Councillor Cresswell. I'm going to move to Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chair. So we haven't had our first meeting yet, so I think your point around actually shifting scrutiny management to sort of after the scrutiny meetings is a is a really sensible suggestion, because I'm not going to go back into the last municipal year because I wasn't the chair then. So, and I just wanted to provide some reassurance in terms of this point around finance and things like that. So, in children's, we've always long-standing had standing agenda items on quarterly performance reports where we look at statistical neighbours, quarterly finance reports, agency spend. So it's one of the things I really love talking about is how much are we spending on agency social workers versus having our own permanent social workers. So there's a standing agenda parts that we really do look at the finances, which I think is important for new councillors to know, particularly given the fact that, you know, adult social care and children's social care is where the bulk of the spend in the council goes. So we should have a really, whilst we've got that kind of moral and legal obligation to our children in care and the children across Plymouth, it's also that fact of we have that responsibility around the finances too, and we grip that quite strongly in this children's one. The agenda that's on here is slightly out of date from the one we've done at the agenda set. So we've had our agenda set meeting, so with the leadership team. One of the things I've brought forward onto the agenda, a new item, which is topical, is I commissioned the officers to do an initial look into the Milburn report. So there's the Milburn report on NEET, not in education, employment or training. It's a really interesting, important report and identifies local authorities as key sort of conveners and coordinators of all the different infrastructure that's supposed to support children. Oh, actually, there it is. So it is actually on that agenda piece. And I thought, given that was only just published, I thought it was a really topical issue and actually really important to look at and scrutinise what the council's doing currently on that area, given it's such an important issue. And then, yeah, so we've had to rejuggle some of the bits on our agenda, but there's nothing that I think I'd want to bring to the Scrutiny Management Board at this moment, to be honest.
That's absolutely fine.
Lewis.
So just a clarifying question, this kind of opportunity is for us to highlight things that we may want the individual panels to have a deep dive in, is that right?
It's for members to say where they're going with their panel, but also what I'm doing today is asking us as members if there's anything that's pressing that you feel that either the management board or the scrutiny panels themselves you would like looked at.
Thank you. Yeah, of course I'm not, thank you, Chair. I'm not chairing a panel, but
you are a valued member of this committee, and actually you can make suggestions that we value that. And also, being new, you're going to bring kind of some new ideas.
Thank you. I do think I have a couple. One follows on from your kind of point on in this document, there's a point on an overheating labour market, and even though we talk about near full employment, I think it'd be interesting to understand the levels of underemployment. For example, I've come out of university a couple of years ago, almost, 90, 80...
Excuse me, could I just ask members, please, for due respect to the person that's speaking, that have private conversations? It makes it very distracting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it would be interesting to understand greater the extent of underemployment and, structural unemployment, and the ways in which that is actually presented. How many people are coming out of university and getting jobs that they don't actually want, that don't match their skills necessarily. So that would be one thing that would be interesting to look at more. And the other point I wanted to make was potentially on communities. So there was some statistics released recently on like the rainbow map and how life expectancy for queer people in the UK has reduced. Likewise, a lot of our different marginalised communities are facing increasing, hate crimes, violence, reductions in life expectancy, that social inequalities follow those lines of intersectional issues. And so it'd be really interesting to see if there was any way of addressing how different communities are being impacted, and making a further kind of segregation to understand how different communities are facing issues within Plymouth. And I know that's quite a wide question, but maybe in terms of inequality and access to various different things, how are different communities, our queer communities, our Kurdish communities, our Asian communities, whatever it is, our women, how are they kind of faring against each other?
Councillor Steele, you wanted to come back on that one?
Not on the second point, because that's not my committee, I think. On the first one, to say that's really helpful, and I think that is right in terms of having the new perspective. The thing I would want to caution, though, is to only look at the university graduates, because the report itself says sort of that whilst there is a challenge and the sort of white collar jobs have been sort of disappearing in recent years, that university education still acts as a protective factor from unemployment and things. So I think it's that thing of, I think it's really easy to focus purely on the kind of university education, but actually if we look at it from a deprivation angle, it's probably the would be looking more at kind of actually the more marginalised groups, like people who are care experienced, etc. And then also potentially that's where we have more levers and more responsibility to act, particularly because we're all corporate parents. I don't want to prejudge it, but I wanted to get their initial thoughts, they as the collective, as the council officers. But that's a really useful and interesting angle. But I just want to caution that we don't end up going down that route, only looking at university educated people.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. What we will do is the democratic support on noting all of these, and then they will go away and make recommendations for us as to whether they feel it's the Scrutiny Management Board or it should go to the relevant panels. And what we will do, Paul and I will discuss it, and then we will feed back to all of the members of this committee. So thank you for the suggestions. We will look at that and come back. I can't say here and now, yes, we'll do it like that. As Councillor Steele pointed out, it does overlap more areas. So we will do that, okay? Councillor Mahoney.
Thank you, Chair. The NHS is fabulous with all its new developments and the CDC and all the new treatments and services provided, but there's a great concern still amongst particularly elderly people and those who are not IT connected about how you actually start to access these services. It's still a problem. I note it's not on our scrutiny panel agenda at the moment, access to primary care, but it causes a lot of problems when it doesn't work in A&E and ambulances and all sorts of backups and problems. So I wonder whether this could be addressed at some point in the next couple of meetings.
I'm looking to Councillor Murphy. Pauline.
John, when we have our first scrutiny meeting, you're more than welcome to suggest that, and we can add that to our work programme. It's not a problem.
Mark?
Thank you, Chair. I'm all good. Nothing to report here. Thanks.
Andrew?
Chair, I'm not sure if it's appropriate for me to say it at this moment, or I should have said it earlier, but I have got a little bit of concern at what Mr. Lowry, Councillor Lowry, said, that there's a uplift of £50,000 per unit. I'm very concerned about that as a builder and a site manager. I'd never be in work. I'd be working at a loss all the time, Chair. So I find it hard to believe that what the statement he made, I know he's not here to defend it, so apologies. I'm not speaking out of turn. I'm trying to speak out of turn, but if his figures of 50,000 a unit that the council have to pay, that means you're spending £4 million extra on the 80 homes at Bath Street and 6 million on Southway. That seems ludicrous. So
Okay.
can I make a suggestion?
You can, I was just going to, yeah, go on, I'll let you finish.
So all the builders I know down here, and I've been down here for years, I don't know anyone that, everyone I know builds houses. So it just seems it's a problem for the council. So can that be looked at? Because that's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. £50,000 you've got to chuck at a house for a builder to build it for you because it's not worth them doing it.
Okay, if you could press your button, because people at home can't hear both of us at once, or one of them probably. What I would say to that is we've noted that, or the Democratic support. We will get that fired off to Councillor Lowry for a response, which will come not only to you, but to the panel, so that we can do that. But what I would encourage is when cabinet members are here, there is no problem. Even if you think I shouldn't be asking it, ask it anyway. So he would have been able, hopefully, to have answered your question. I can't. So we will get that in a written form sent off to him. If we then get a response that you're not satisfied or the committee's not satisfied, then we can do some more work on it, as we were saying all the way through. So I hope that reassures you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would like a conversation with you privately after. I've got a suggestion. I'm just not sure if it's appropriate to say here.
No, that's fine. Come and speak to me. I don't bite. Yeah, much. Thank you, Andrew. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. Myself and my fellow councillors have gone through Councillor Lowry's document with a fine-tooth comb, and we have probably 3 or 4 pages there of questions. And for anybody else who has questions, who shall we send those questions to get feedback? Because otherwise we're just going to have all these questions and answers that we would like answers to, and just need to find out who to get the responses from.
Okay. I'm going to be very lenient and nice, all right? What I would say is if any members, especially new members, that have got any questions or things that they want to find out, because I can see how much you've written down, what I would suggest is you summarise that and send your questions to the Democratic support team. It will save an awful lot of time and an awful lot of paperwork. And then should you, anything that comes back from those answers is something you want to investigate further, you're lucky, you're my vice chair, so pick up the phone or email and we can arrange it going forward. So I'm volunteering my Democratic support, they didn't know that. So do it that way, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. We had so many questions that I just didn't feel it pertinent to just, because, you know, we've been here for probably another hour just answering these questions.
Yeah, no.
So
are you happy with that way forward?
Yes, thank you very much.
Excellent. The only other question that I've got, which something Councillor Lowry raised and somebody else raised about antisocial behaviour, that it had fallen to record levels or lows or whatever it is. In my own ward, and I know we shouldn't be talking about ward specific, but one of the things that residents ask me all of the time is what is the relationship on antisocial behaviour between the council and the police, and what defines who does what. And one of the things that I've been around a long time and I still struggle with who does what and how they work together. So I would like over the next 12 months that we as a management board look into antisocial behaviour, but not just council antisocial behaviour, how the agencies work together. Councillor Steele.
I've been front page news on antisocial behaviour, and John and I have been talking about it since he has been elected. So I would welcome that, because I'll be honest, I've tried all the different, and I know we're not talking about our individual wards, but that bit of it being the lowest it's ever been just doesn't actually reflect the reality of what my residents are telling me. And then that point around coordinating across agencies, I actually think that would be a really pertinent, helpful piece, because I feel like I'm struggling as a ward councillor, and I'd like to better understand how the agencies should be working together in practice, because I feel like I'm at a loss where I feel like I've hit a brick wall in terms of my work with the police, and I see in the issues in my ward, it's very much a police responsibility. So I think that kind of having an opportunity to step back and look at how is it working systematically would be really helpful. I know, for example, Community Connection said to me that I was the first councillor they've had, the person who was working on it, to ever trigger an antisocial behaviour case review, and they'd been doing their job for like 4 years. And actually, is there an issue there of councillors not knowing about the statutory triggers that they've got, some of the resources? Okay, it hasn't resolved the issues completely in my ward, but the fact is that does force a multi-agency meeting. So how clued up are our members as well on the levers that they have available to try and challenge or achieve progress on those issues? So I'd 100% welcome it.
Thank you. Yes.
I would as well, and I'd like to add an additional comment on that. In that, are we able to, when we do that kind of look into that, we're looking also at the root causes of antisocial behaviour. So how has an increase in antisocial behaviour corresponded with a reduction in third spaces, or how has it increased with a rising cost of living, or kind of like in a more systematic issue? Because I really appreciate that, you know, we want to make sure we are understanding the problem and its manifestation and then how it's being solved, but also I think it would be really important to root it in the contextual and very relevant, root causes potentially of some of those issues too.
I'm thinking, because I think there could well be a case there for two differing select committee reviews, because I feel that the coordination between the statutory authorities and how they work together, so that we've got an understanding, because I totally sympathise with Councillor Steele that in my ward particularly, over the years, we've had a lot of antisocial behaviour, and I've called 3 or 4 multi-agencies, but actually we've never quite got to the bottom of the direction of travel. So I would welcome looking at that, because then that would transfer to all of us to be able to give other members that don't sit on these committee a kind of like, I don't know, bookwork, little book of this is how it works, because I think there isn't a lot of understanding, as Councillor Steele says, out there. So that would be a suggestion of mine for one. And actually then we could follow that up with another one on the correlation of, has it got worse? What causes it? How can we look at improving it? So that would be my suggestion, because I think with select committees, it's better to have a smaller focused aim rather than a wider aim that actually gets bogged down in all sorts of red tape. I don't know. That would be my suggestion.
I actually welcome that. I think that's a really fair point. I would kind of come back on that to make sure that if those are done separately, they are interlinked. So for example, if there's a painting done on a wall, there's less likely to be graffiti on it. And that is a very council, like that is very grounded in the work we're doing. If there's a closure of a park, does that increase antisocial behaviour in other areas? I think as long as those two separate things are really interlinked, because I do think they are, I think that would be, yeah, I take that suggestion and I'd agree.
I'm going to take one more question or one more comment, then I'm going to move on. Councillor Steele.
Just to say, Chair, I think I like your suggestion of having it as two. I fully support the point of they are interlinked. It's just, I think the first one around the kind of coordination piece, it's very pragmatic, very narrow in scope. It's helpful to, it's a big complex system. Taking that approach where we zone in on one particular issue is really helpful, and then having that subsequent one that looks at some of the broader determinants and what can we be doing as a council, I think is helpful. So I would welcome it being in that kind of discrete, clear two set approaches so that there's clear aims for each one.
Thank you. So we've got that. Yeah. So what we will do is when we go forward with this, we will be informing members of what we're going to do. We will then, if we're going to do 2 select committees, we will be asking for volunteers from both panels or all 3 panels to form a proportionally based panel to look at both of those. And then to reassure you, both of those reports or select committee findings will come back to this committee. So we will, because not all of us will sit on that because it's voluntary, but then we will be able to come back as to here and as a panel then make recommendations to cabinet or to the portfolio holders about how we think things from our findings could be improved. So I would hope members would be agreeable to that. Excellent. Thank you very much. So that really, I think, Councillor Creswell.
Just going back to the thing that I raised about housing and having, is that something that I would take initially, in fact, to the housing committee and then bring it back to here? That's what I'm really wanting to have some sort of
Yes, it will
right,
go.
that's
you would
fine.
put it onto
Yeah,
your agenda.
to our agenda, and then we will
Because
bring it back here.
the management board have agreed that you can do that. So it goes down to you, and then when you've done it, in your report as chair going forward, you would come back to this committee with, this is what we've done, this is our findings, these are our recommendations, or we can make recommendations on top of your findings to send up the line. I am desperately trying to change the way we do scrutiny this year.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm now going to move to the last item. You'll be Councillor Allinson. Oh, right. Which is the action log, which I'm going to pass over to Elliot. Is that right? Well, I thought we'd just done that. Sorry, Lewis. Okay, go on then.
Just on the just on the point that was raised earlier in terms of some of the work around holding housing statistics to account, and going through the work programme, there's kind of like the descriptions of the screening panels is somewhat vague, and I think people have done their best to try and like put the appropriate item in the appropriate place. But housing, I think, is the one thing definitely that's fallen through the gap. For example, the first meeting of Housing Scrutiny Panel in a couple of weeks, the first meeting that's on our car park, but plans for homes is on the Growth and Infrastructure Panel. And I know also from the report for council for last year's scrutiny that the growth and infrastructure panel met for almost twice as much time as the housing panel did. And I think there's a mismatch there. There's clearly the division of workload is not being done correctly and needs reviewing.
I think we're both aware of that. What I intend to do is take that feedback back with the chair and vice chair and the chair and vice chair so that we have discussions, because I sit on that other one as well as you do. So I think that's something that we need to do. And it's part of, Lewis, our realignment of how this city does scrutiny. So, yeah, fair point, and we will take that forward.
Through you, if I may, Chair. Your point is noted, and we've sort of seen the same. I would say a lot of the time it comes down to the fact that the housing and community services sort of terms of reference as set out in the Constitution are quite limited. I think there probably does need to be some conversations about adjusting it. For example, we might want to look into parking. We can only look at car parks. We can't look at on-street. We might want to look into housing. We can only look at social landlords. We can't look at wider plans. So bringing some of that back across would be helpful.
And I would value your input as any and other members as well. Thank you for that. You want to say anything?
Through your chair, it's just to make panel members aware and sort of cast consensus for it. When you look at the layout of the meetings for the Scrutiny Management Board for the year, there's quite a gap between now and our November meeting. All the scrutiny panels do meet again before us, so they sort of double dip before we get to meet. The suggestion therefore, and it would tie in nicely with bringing both the transformation strategy and the corporate peer challenge report back at the right time, would be to set up a September meeting. We can work out the dates between yourselves and through email, but essentially the proposal is for an extra meeting in September to consider the Plymouth Plan Review, transformation strategy and corporate peer challenge, as well as others that we've mentioned today.
Yeah, we did talk about that earlier because we need to bring us back into line. And this is one way we can do it. I've already said I can't do the first week in September, but we will arrange it and come out, and the majority of availability, as long as either Paul or myself are here, then we can go ahead. All right. So thank you for that. Do you want to quickly talk about what the action log is for new members?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So members will see the action log is the last item in their pack. We use the log to track all of the actions and sort of recommendations that come out of a meeting. So after today, this is going to be a few more pages longer. We've got 2 on there at the moment. What I will caveat is there are an awful lot of recommendations that came out of budget scrutiny, and rather than being captured on the action log, you can see them at the bottom of our work programme in the to be scheduled. Personal preferences, there's no point having on your action log something that is to be scheduled. You might as well complete it and put it straight in your work programme. So there would be a much longer list. In relation to the ones you have got in front of you, the first one is in progress, which was to bring the transformation strategy back. That would normally just go on your work programme, but because there's 5 recommendations to it, I've kept them there. So that should be completed if we do our September meeting. That's when that would come back. And the second action in relation to the 11th of March is complete. There's a table there addressing the questions from the panel. So I will end there, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I've managed to keep us going 25 minutes longer than we thought, but I think today has been quite productive. I know this was a general overview kind of thing so that new members, and actually you could see the direction of travel that I want to change and hold people to account. So I hope you've enjoyed it. And for those of you that are interested, the football finished. England 2, the Democratic Republic or Congo DR1. So England did, although at least I got the result right. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy your evenings, guys. Thank you for your attendance.